Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the joint press conference of Quad9 and SWITCH. Thank you very much for your interest. Quad9, a public domain name service, is moving its headquarters from California, US to Zürich, Switzerland, in order to offer internet users a high level of internet privacy protection worldwide. SWITCH is strongly supporting this initiative. In the next 15 minutes, you will learn all about this unique step in the history of internet, and afterwards we will be happy to answer your questions. Please write them in the text box below at any time from now. My name is Tom Kleiber. I'm Managing Director of SWITCH. I'm sitting here in the headquarters of SWITCH in Zurich, together with Bill Woodcock, Chairman of the Board of Quad9, and Martin Leuthold, Head of the Security and Network Division of SWITCH. Also in the call are John Todd, General Manager of Quad9, joining us from Oregon, US, and Florian Schütz, Federal Cybersecurity Delegate and Head of the National Cybersecurity Center in Switzerland. He is joining us from Bern. I'd like to open the presentation part with a few words about the background of SWITCH. We are a foundation established over 30 years ago by the Swiss governments to connect the university in Switzerland with the global internet by that time. So we became the first internet service provider. Today we are supporting the education, research and innovation community in Switzerland on their journey into the digital age. To do so, we provide network and data center infrastructure and digital services, but also legal consulting and a digital identity for the community. Due to the fact that SWITCH is strongly committed to a digital world that is secure, trustful, and that protects users' privacy, we also operate one of the National Computer Emergency Response Team of Switzerland to protect our critical ICT infrastructure against cyber attacks. Last but not least, we have been operating the registry for Swiss internet domain names ending in .ch since day one. Based on this background, we decided to support this initiative of Quad9. And with that, I would like now to hand over to Bill, who will explain what the move of Quad9 to Switzerland has to do with privacy and security for internet users around the globe. Please, Bill.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'd like to begin by giving an overview of the field we're working within. The domain name system is the global directory, which allows you to utilize internet resources like websites and email using human-readable and memorable names rather than difficult-to-remember numeric addresses. Every device which uses the internet must have a way to convert these names to numbers, else it cannot communicate across the internet. The servers on the internet, which facilitate this process, are called public recursive resolvers. They receive queries containing domain names from users' devices and reply with numeric addresses. And they do this for every device which uses the internet. Your computer and your telephone, to be sure, but also perhaps your light bulbs and thermostats and refrigerators and watches and running shoes. Each of these devices is creating a constant stream of information about its status and your location and activities, and unavoidably sharing that information with public recursive resolvers. That's why it's of critical importance that public recursive resolvers be bound by strong privacy regulation, such as the General Data Protection Regulation that applies in Europe, and that regulation be strongly enforced. Before today, all 4 of the global public recursive resolvers were under the jurisdiction and law of a single court in Northern California, a court which does not possess a mandate to enforce privacy regulations on behalf of Europeans, nor to the standards that Europeans demand of their systems of governance and accountability. But from today forward, there will be 2 options rather than just one. Quad9, the only one of the 4 global public recursive resolvers which operates as a non-for-profit in the public benefit, has placed itself under Swiss regulatory authority. We've relocated from California to Zurich. Quad9 has always been fully GDPR compliant, but from this day forward, that compliance will no longer be merely voluntary. It will instead be guaranteed by the strength of Swiss law, and our conduct will be overseen by the Swiss Federal Data Protection Commissioner. We have reincorporated Quad9 as a Swiss public benefit foundation, operating purely non-commercially in the public interest. And as we move to Switzerland, we increase the transparency of our governance. In addition to myself, Martin Leutold, and Dorian Kim, 2 independent members join our board, Florian Schutz, who's joining us today for the Q&A session, and Benno Overender. Florian heads the Swiss National Federal Cybersecurity Center, and Benno Overender is the director of NLNet Labs, the Dutch National Network Research Agency. Our sole reason for existence continues to be the provision of a global public recursive resolver which does not collect your personal information. We do not record it. We do not seek to profit from it. We exist to serve you, the public, and no private benefit. Quad9's decision to move to Switzerland was the endpoint of a several-year process. Quad9 began 5 years ago as an idea proposed by, among others, European privacy and data protection regulators. Our goal was to create an exemplar of best practices, a demonstration proof that it was possible to create a better, faster, more secure, and more inclusive recursive resolver which simultaneously did not surveil users. One which existed to serve users rather than to extract and monetize their personal information. We began a multi-year search for a permanent domicile. We sought a country with national laws and a privacy regulatory regime which strongly supported the rights of people. One which had an exemplary regard for human rights and an unmatched commitment to respect for privacy. Switzerland made the short list for several reasons. Switzerland does not have secret laws. Subjects of Swiss investigations have a right to know that they're being investigated. And, unlike many countries, Switzerland limits the ability of its government to impose gag orders precluding the subjects of investigations from discussing the government's actions. But most importantly, Switzerland has a strong data protection commissioner. And crucially, because Swiss data protection laws are criminal laws, Quad9 is answerable to the government rather than to any individual whose privacy may have been compromised. This is crucially important because it means that individuals need not establish standing within a Swiss court to bring a complaint. The Swiss Data Protection Commissioner regulates Quad9 as a Swiss entity, not Quad9's users who may be anywhere in the world. Thus, the Swiss government is extending to Quad9 users of every citizenship in every country of the world the exact same high level of protection it gives its own citizens. I cannot emphasize highly enough the gift that the Swiss government is giving the world through this practice. As we narrowed our choice of domicile, the Swiss government took 2 additional steps which made Switzerland the most compelling choice. First, Ofcom, the Federal Office of Communications, produced a finding of law that Know Your Customer compliance was not required of Quad9. Since Quad9 doesn't keep any records of who uses our service, this was a critical exemption. Second, the Post and Telecommunications Surveillance Service produced a finding of law that Quad9 was not required to comply with the surveillance and law enforcement data collection and retention requirements, which otherwise would have applied. With these building blocks in place, we were able to build a solid legal foundation for the long-term privacy of Quad9's users. Having selected Switzerland, the work of effectuating the move began, and SWITCH stepped forward to make that effort possible. We have a close and long-standing relationship with SWITCH, in which we provide domain name system infrastructure to SWITCH, supporting the performance and resilience of the .ch domain name with clusters of servers in 220 data centers around the world. At the same time, SWITCH supports our public benefit purpose with secure facilities inside Switzerland in which we perform cryptographic key management for more than 50 other national domains. Extending this mutually supporting relationship to include the Quad9 recursive resolvers was a natural step and brings immense benefits to both organizations. We're immensely grateful to Switch for this support and recognize the huge value that Switch's generous actions are bringing to the people of Switzerland and around the world. I'd like to take a moment to recognize that our efforts don't occur in a vacuum. There's a broader effort afoot in Europe to improve the privacy of DNS services, and we're proud to play our part within it. We're enthusiastically supportive of the goals of the European Commission's DNS for EU program, and we believe we fully embody the principles of DNS for EU. And with that, I'd like to turn the mic over to Martin Leuthold, who can tell you about Switch's reasons for supporting this move.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill. Well, basically there are many reasons for the collaboration, but I will pick up just the four most important ones for me. First of all, Quad9 and SWITCH share the same mission, to provide a safer internet and better privacy for everyone. We share the dedication to provide valid, leading-edge alternatives to the DNS services of US tech giants that are about to monopolize user data in the internet to profile us all in more detail than we can imagine. Second, as the Swiss domain registry, Switch has a mandate to protect Swiss internet users. Quad9, controlled by Swiss law, is able to extend this protection of privacy to internet users worldwide. Switch contributes its database of malicious domains to Quad9, so internet users worldwide cannot connect to harmful destinations. This will be producing very tangible improvements for the beneficiaries of the Switch Foundation, but also the globally acting Swiss education, research and education community. Third, PCH and Switch have been collaborating closely for more than 10 years, as Bill already elaborated. Without this highly trusted relationship on a corporate and personal level, discussions about this project would never have started. Switch is a Swiss security pioneer and the National Competence Center for Cybersecurity. We have been working for decades to establish a worldwide network of highly trusted national competence centers, knowing that internet security can only be achieved in a collaborative international effort. And last but not least, Switzerland is a neutral, stable country with a transparent legal framework and the data privacy regulations of the highest standards. Switch is a perfect location for worldwide cybersecurity and data privacy initiatives, not only on a political and strategical level, but as well on a technically and operationally. And with that, I would like to hand back to Tom.
So Quad9 is placing itself within the Swiss jurisdiction. With that, it is sending out a strong message about the need and the importance of protecting privacy of internet users around the world. We from Switch are proud to support this initiative as it strongly fits in our general purpose to make internet technology available for anyone in a people-centric, trustful and secure way. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I would like to conclude the presentation part and would now open the floor for you to answer your questions. If not yet done, please write them in the text box below. I would like to give the first question to Florian Schütz. Florian, why is Switzerland the perfect place for Quad9?
Yes, Martin, thank you very much for this very important question. So we heard already a lot about the positive regulatory framework, about a good development. I do think from a national view, one very, very important point is that we believe that diversity in available services is also very important. When you look at DNS, at public DNS services, most of them in the past have been located in the US. There was one in China, and we hope to fill a void here by bringing Quad9 to Switzerland, the headquarters, and also offer services here from Switzerland and on the European mainland. That's one very, very important point. And I do think it also is well aligned with our national strategy, where we try to bring services that neatly combine security, but keeping the privacy of its users in a balance, and allow them or have them here in Switzerland to provide their services, not only for Swiss citizens, but basically for everyone around the globe. Second, one thing that is very important for us at the government, especially the National Cybersecurity Center, is collaboration becomes much easier. So we are looking forward to an in-depth collaboration with Quad9 as well. And also exchanging information will be much easier to better protect internet users also in Switzerland, especially also companies that are located in Switzerland. We see a huge benefit, for example, for small and medium-sized enterprises if they use services like this. And I could go on and on, but I would also like to highlight one benefit I do think Switzerland provides to Quad9 that has not yet been mentioned. We have a lot of knowledge in Switzerland. So, for example, the diploma studies at ETH Zurich were founded exactly 30 years ago. We have a huge influx of talent, and I do think having organizations like Quad9 here benefits them in providing talents, in bringing them into an environment of exchange, also on an academic level in technology, but also on an international level with all our peers.
Thank you, Florian. We'll turn to more questions from the press now. There we go. Question from Hans-Jörg Maran. Were you in contact with the Swiss government prior to the move to Switzerland? Absolutely. This was, as we said, a many-year process that involved narrowing from a large number of countries with GDPR harmonized laws down to just Switzerland as the one that we felt was the best choice. That involved a lot of discussions with the Swiss government, which resulted in the two findings of law that made this choice the most compelling one. I think perhaps I should also turn to John Todd, our general manager, and perhaps he can discuss that a little bit as well.
Sure, thank you. I think that we've had a number of different discussions with other nations, as Bill mentioned, trying to determine which location would be the best for us. The cooperative nature of the Swiss conversations that we've had over, I know that this process with this announcement has been ongoing close to 2 years in an official way, but we've been undergoing this investigation for as long as Quad9 has existed almost, and so that's about 4 years in total. We've been looking at these different locations. So yes, the conversations specifically with Switzerland have been going on for at least 2 years, and we've had exceptional communication with both the folks at Switch and the Swiss government during the process.
Thank you. Can we have the next question, please? Also from Hans-Jörg Maran. In your press release, you mentioned that you benefit from important concessions and findings of law from the Swiss government. Yeah, the two main concessions that allowed us to make this move with complete confidence were, number one, the release from Know Your Customer requirements, because we don't collect information about users. We don't know who the users are. We can't identify them. Therefore, being exempt from a requirement to identify them is pretty much a requirement. And then secondly, The finding that we were not a telecommunications service provider that would be subject to the requirement to do data collection and retention on behalf of Swiss law enforcement and intelligence authorities. I think, our service exists in an interesting balance between cybersecurity and privacy, and we regard the privacy rights of individuals as paramount, yet people's privacy rights stop at the point at which they harm others. So there's this balance in which we are very favored by law enforcement. Vast numbers of law enforcement folks use Quad9 and recommend Quad9 because of the cybersecurity advantages it provides, the malware blocking and so forth that keep people safe. So the requirement to do data collection on behalf of law enforcement or intelligence would have violated individuals' privacy rights in our view. So being exempted from that was really good. At the same time, we are left free to work with law enforcement voluntarily if there is a person in danger, if there is something that overrides individual privacy rights. So we exist in this balance. Privacy is a very high priority. Cybersecurity is a very high priority. And the third leg of that stool is performance, right? So we're constantly working in this balance between these three priorities, all of which are high, and sometimes they're in conflict with each other. We've overhauled our website, and the new website is up just today, and we discuss all of these issues in much more detail on the website. So these findings of law from the Swiss government, and to be clear, the background of just very good, very transparent law around privacy and security in Switzerland are the things that allowed us to move here. Next question, please. Question from Monica Ermer. How does the development of encrypted DNS influence the service? What if I choose Quad9? I'm sorry, the rest of the question is cut off.
What if I choose Quad9 but the app provides it?
Yeah, okay. So let me try and summarize the rest of the question. So the question is regarding encrypted DNS, encryption between the user and the recursive resolver, Quad9 in this case. What if a user chooses to use Quad9, but they run an app which does not respect that choice and tries to send the traffic to another recursive resolver that does not have as strong privacy protections? So I'm going to address that question to John Todd.
Sure. Thank you. We've been trying to encourage the use of encryption where possible. Of course, encryption as a fundamental right, we believe, is a good thing in all communications, and especially the DNS, which is one of the last communications methods that really is not encrypted natively. The use of, or I suppose the use of Quad9 on an operating system level, where all of your queries go to Quad9, gives you that protection. However, app designers are now starting to look at having per application layer changes in the way that DNS resolvers work. Instead of using just the resolver that the operating system is using, there are sometimes alternatives where each application may go in a different direction. We are, from a policy perspective, that's not necessarily a good idea, because it becomes very difficult to enforce policy, local policy, that the network operator wishes to put in place. And so that's a challenging problem right now. There is work occurring in the IETF to standardize discovery mechanisms for encrypted resolvers, and we're very anxious to see that, that work being completed. We hope that that will reconsolidate encrypted DNS resolver discovery into a single pathway where both the operating system and applications are able to use the same encrypted path therefore using the same local policy, whether that policy is Quad9 or potentially if your company has a local policy as well. We don't want to override that. We would not want to be the resolver used if somebody is trying to override a local policy. So we're hoping that this new standards work can bring things back together where only a single encrypted resolver is used, and that's fully understood by both the user and the network operator at the same time.
John touches on a really important point there, which is that as a nonprofit, our goal is not just to protect the people who choose to use our service directly, it's to improve the overall standards of the industry as a whole. A huge part of our mission is to raise the bar of minimum expectations that users have of their providers. And the work in standards bodies to improve privacy practices is a giant part of our work. We implement standards. We do not get out in front of the standards community and experiment on users. So we drive the standards process forward in order that we can implement better, more protective standards. Next question, also from Monica Ermert. How much do you still have to answer to US legal requests for still existing infrastructure? So this is a really interesting question because it gets to the conflict between nations over the scope of applicability of their laws. And so the European Union has a position of extraterritoriality with regard to GDPR and European citizens. The position of the European Union is that GDPR applies to and benefits European citizens regardless of their location in the world. In the same way, the United States is a little extraterritorial, the United States has a very broad reach in terms of its claims around intelligence data collection and law enforcement data collection. The move to Switzerland gives us a very, very firm legal standing for protecting the privacy of users. The process by which the United States would try to get information about a Quad9 user is something called an MLAT, a Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty. They would submit a request to the Foreign Ministry of Switzerland, which would then forward it to the Swiss Justice Ministry, which would evaluate the request in terms of its human rights impact first, and then in terms of whether there was a Swiss law that it corresponded with that could be enforced in Switzerland in order to produce the desired effect. Now, since we've already been exempted from these Know Your Customer and data collection requirements, there are no Swiss laws that directly match up with an MLAT request for us to identify a user. So the theory here is that the Swiss government bounces that MLAT on that grounds. Now, as you are pointing out, there's also a lot of Quad9 infrastructure servers in the United States, just as there are servers in 90 other countries around the world. In the most extreme case, US law enforcement could walk into a data center and take a server. However, there is nothing stored on that server. There are no records about users being stored. There are no records about users being collected. Therefore, there's nothing on that server that would tell them anything about any Quad9 user. They can always place a wiretap out on the internet somewhere in front of servers, which is why we strongly recommend that you use standards-based encryption like DNS over TLS. And you should be doing that anyway. That has nothing to do with whether you're using Quad9 or another provider. Lastly, there's the question of whether subpoenas could be served on, or national security letters served on Quad9 staff in the United States. And that's an area where we are doing very active research on the law, but there are a number of reasons why that appears to not be a path to forcing the production of data. First of all, national security letters have as their valid targets telecommunications service providers and financial services providers. There is no telecommunications service provider, Quad9, in the United States. There are employees who are contractors providing ICT services or management services to Quad9, but they are not themselves telecommunications service providers. Secondly, we have the finding of law from the Swiss government that Quad9 in Switzerland is not a telecommunications service provider. And although that's a Swiss legal determination rather than a US legal determination, it provides a precedent. Third, US law does not allow the demand, well, you can demand anything you want. It cannot compel the production of data which hasn't been collected. So since we haven't collected the data in the first place, we can't be compelled to produce it. And furthermore, we can't be drafted into the creation of a mechanism to collect data that we don't currently have a mechanism to collect. So all of those we feel are pretty strong protections, in addition to which there has not been any evidence of US legal push in this direction. There are not US legal or intelligence requests to Quad9 thus far, and we have years of operation. So Quad9 is simply not a good or easy place for a government to get information. They have many other places that they can turn to that are lower hanging fruit. What's our next question? Renee Wan asks, Switzerland requires ISPs to block websites of international casinos. Does Quad9 comply with this? Quad9 is not an internet service provider. Again, Quad9 has not been found to be a telecommunications service provider, so the entire spectrum of laws that would apply to an internet service provider do not apply to Quad9. That includes the blocking requirements. Now, a huge portion of Quad9's reason for existing is to block malware. Casinos are not malware. In theory, going to a casino is not going to infect your machine with a virus. In reality, there may be a significant degree of overlap there, but only the malware side of that is of interest to us. The Swiss government, the Swiss CERT, and SWITCH are all contributing to the malware threat intelligence that allows us to do our cybersecurity work, as are many, many other CERTs and threat intelligence analysts around the world. So we do not censor based on national law. We provide malware blocking, often with the assistance of government-supported CERTs. But there is a hard line there between the purpose of one and the purpose of the other. We are a cybersecurity organization. We do not facilitate censorship. Next question. From Gerard Best. What message does the move from the US to EU send to internet users in other parts of the world, including developing countries? I'll take a brief stab at that and then hand that over to John. I think the important thing here is that before, there was the appearance of 4 choices, but those 4 choices were all the same flavor. They were all, including us, regulated by the same set of laws and subject to the jurisdiction of the same court in Northern California. So the really important thing here is that now there are 2 choices. One is a jurisdiction and set of laws of Northern California. The other is a jurisdiction and set of laws of Switzerland. So people throughout the world, people in Trinidad, people in Tanzania, people in Indonesia, look at the available marketplace of choices. Before, they were trying to distinguish between a nonprofit and 3 for-profit companies, but all within the same jurisdiction. Now there's a much, much clearer delineation between the options that are available, and people in the rest of the world can choose between Swiss and US jurisdiction for the requests that they want to send. So, John, do you want to take a stab at answering that as well?
Sure. I think actually this also works in favor not just of Quad9, but it works in favor of promotion of the GDPR harmonization strategy that's occurring, of course, within Europe. But the way that we are transitioning this, I'm hopeful that that other nations who are evaluating what they are going to do with privacy as far as their own local laws will start to look at GDPR more favorable as well, more in the technology sector, maybe even in specifically with DNS. So I think this goes both ways. That not only other nations who are looking at this move, I'm hopeful that they start to evaluate their own local legal structures in light of the GDPR being something that is desirable for services like the DNS. I know that in the United States there are some moves at the state level to promote better data security and privacy, and we welcome those. We are hoping that that can be much more standardized, not just in the United States, but of course globally, where nations are looking to the GDPR and discovering that it is a valid and useful thing to apply, or something very similar is a valid and useful thing to apply to all their technology arenas.
Thank you, John. Next question from Monica Armert. Why choose Switzerland instead of a GDPR country, given that that NGOs have had some issues with the Swiss data protection law? First of all, Swiss law is harmonized with GDPR in a very similar way to the way EU nations harmonize to GDPR. GDPR, of course, is EU law now, but for many years it was implemented in each country in the same way that Switzerland implements it in a harmonized way. So, first of all, we are not bound to GDPR per se. What we are bound to is the highest standard of protection. And we want to be in the country that will give our users the greatest benefit. And if GDPR per se is not the be-all and end-all of privacy benefit for users, then we're not going to pick a GDPR country just because it's GDPR. So our search started with GDPR countries, but we were open-minded and looked at all countries that were GDPR harmonized. We did not find a GDPR country that had the combination that Switzerland gave us of not having a mechanism by which a gag order could be enforced on us for intelligence purposes or national security purposes. Swiss law instead very much constrains the government's right to impose a gag order to actual underway criminal prosecutions. So in the event that the Swiss government were asking us about an underway case of a criminal prosecution, they could ask us to remain quiet about that until the case became a matter of public record. But there isn't a Swiss equivalent of a national security letter gag order as there is in the United States, for instance. That lack of a gag order was probably the single most important thing. We did not find other EU countries or find EU countries that were offering that together with know your customer requirement together with any sort of exemption from intelligence data collection or law enforcement data collection. So it was that combination that made Switzerland a more attractive choice than the EU countries that were also in the final few in our selection. Okay, so here I think a question from Martin. Can you explain a little bit more what SWITCH's part is in regard to this arrangement?
Sure. As I already explained, it was a pretty logical, straightforward decision to start talks when the search narrowed down to Switzerland because we have a long-term established partnership already. I think I go without that. Therefore we provided a pretty good basis. We understand each other very well because we are, as the domain registry for .ch as well, in the DNS business and basically the DNS competence center here in Switzerland. So there were no questions on the operational level. On the other hand, as Bill already mentioned, we have already a collocation here in-house, and it was not a far way to discuss as well to base a to be established foundation like now Quad9 Foundation as well, collocated here with Switch in Zürich. And then on the other hand, we have a legal team. Tom mentioned that before. We have a legal team here in-house because we are as well a legal competence center, especially when it comes to data protection law for the Swiss universities. And we could support these quite difficult legal questions that we had with this move from the US to Zurich, with all these questions about international law because of the international extent of the infrastructure of Quad9, of the workforce of Quad9. We could help to sort it out as well with the specialized lawyers of Quad9 in the US. And therefore we have been driving that project together, and we will for sure as well support Quad9 operationally and with the development of our role as domain registry for .ch in Switzerland. We see as well, as Florian mentioned before, a big benefit in this collocation as well from a technical and operational and knowledge perspective.
I think at a tactical level, Switch has invested an immense amount of hours of labor in all of the functional aspects of getting a Swiss nonprofit foundation set up here for us. Their legal and administrative staff have been immensely helpful. And there is a lot of work to set something like that up and set it up well in a way that has transparent governance and is responsible to users. And so we thank them very much for that. In the bigger picture, strategically, they have 30 years of experience doing transparent multi-stakeholder governance within the context of a Swiss foundation. And since that's really what we're trying to do, they bring that experience and expertise with them to this project. So I think internet multi-stakeholder governance is not an easy thing to do well. And so having a partner that also has a lot of experience with that, but in the specific jurisdiction that we're moving to, was really critical for us. I think that helped make this possible in a way that simply would have been extraordinarily difficult if we had not had such an experienced and generous partner. Next question. How to deal with the filtering of non-Swiss online betting? I understand there's a blacklist with around 80 sites and DNSSEC fails when filters are on. Okay, so first of all, we do not do censorship, so that is not so much a question for us as for the internet service providers that would carry traffic. We were not going to block an online betting site on the basis of it being an online betting site. The vast majority of online betting sites are not blocked. If that betting site has been compromised or is a criminal enterprise and is serving up malware that threatens users, then yes, we absolutely block it. When sites are DNSSEC signed and we block them, if someone is doing their own DNSSEC validation, they will see that it is blocked and that the blocking has failed DNSSEC validation. And that's fine because they're still protected. There are cases, on the other hand, where there are valid sites that are not blocked that are widely used, yet they can't quite get their DNSSEC right. And so in those very few cases, we temporarily put in what's called a negative trust anchor to keep the DNSSEC failure on the originator's part from blocking access through Quad9. But those are always temporary in nature, and we review those periodically and make sure that they're still necessary. We're approaching the end of our scheduled time, but there's still some questions in queue. So I'd like to address one more before we wrap up. For all those of you who have submitted questions we haven't been able to answer live, we'll make sure that you get answers by email. And if any other questions occur to you, just send them to the email addresses indicated in the press release. So what's our last question? What are the risks to which Quad9 was exposed if it remained located in the United States? In the real world, we were not being subjected to national security letters and subpoenas and so forth. But that could always change, and users know that that can change. And in the United States, a gag order could have prevented us from letting users know that that had happened. It did not happen, but that's a matter of trust, and the situation in Switzerland, the legal and regulatory situation, simply gives us a better way to communicate with our users. But really the big issue here is about competition and choice. Having all 4 global recursive resolvers based in the same court, same jurisdiction, same laws, just isn't giving people around the world a real choice. And so the danger, I think, is more around stagnation and complacency than it is around legal threat. And Quad9's role here is not to maximize shareholder value. We don't have shareholders, we have the public. If we want to maximize value to the public, innovation comes in many forms. There's technical innovation, but policy and regulatory innovation is equally important, and moving out of the United States gives the whole world another choice that just didn't exist before. So that's really what we're after. Not so much fixing a specific problem in the United States as giving everyone a choice that did not railroad them into one jurisdiction in the US. So we've come to the end of the press conference. Thank you all very much, and goodbye for now. Look forward to answering your questions online.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, with that we've come to the end of the press conference. That's it for now. Thank you very much for your interest and for joining us here. Goodbye.